Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Itzli-Ra, the podcast where we talk about all things related to enlightenment, spirituality, and
Everyday life.
I'm Carlos.
And I'm Veronica.
And today we have a pretty interesting topic. We are going to talk about your higher self because
Okay.
it's just one of those things that you hear a lot about on social media. You're talking to your higher self, you're connecting with your higher self. So, we want to talk about like what is your higher self? What are the different interpretations of your higher self, and what does that mean for the everyday person who is going on this spiritual journey? So let's start with talking about like what do you think your higher self is, Veronica? Like in your journey, what have you
I go
learned?
first.
Yeah.
Okay. So for me, my higher self is the one that is clear, almost like the one that's in the zone, right? That you're just so centered, connected, and still that nothing will phase you when you're executing or making a decision on something to move forward. For me, it was the turning point that I really, really felt it was after divorce, and then those decisions that I was making, but in a very calm way than most people would have been like emotional about it, attached to this, attached to that. So it was very calm and um understanding and looking at things in a way that I knew I was going to come out okay, right? And it is that knowing that does not criticize you, does not, tell you that you're doing something wrong. It is that it is not that. It's a part of you that is compassionate. It is a part of you that is clear. It's a part of you that understands the whole so that it can direct you in the way you need to go. And it's for me is the weirdest way because it's just like calm
Hmm.
and knowing that it's going to happen and it did for me. It did showed itself. The things showed themselves, but I was in a space to be able to make those decisions without even looking back or with regret.
Hmm.
Yeah, that was my interpretation of higher self is that the one that never criticizes you, the one that never thinks of these grandiosities and these fantasies in that way. It's just the one that directs you with clarity.
Hmm. Okay. I've been going down this rabbit hole of higher self, and one of the things that I've read is that your consciousness, who you are right now, is a fragment of where your higher self. So it is a representation of it, and that your higher self sits in it's of course you're all energy, and all of this is energy, but your higher self sits at a level that is very it can see all of you, and you basically everything across multiple dimensions and timelines. So it's aware of all of these things. And there's even the idea that there are multiple fragments of a higher self that can exist as different people, which is super wild. Like I was just like, oh shit, is that
Interesting.
even possible? But it does go to the idea of people that are like twin flames, right? I mean, the idea of that you're one soul. Well, how can you be one soul? Well, if you're multiple fragments of a higher self, yeah, it could make sense because there are different levels of frequency and vibration, and your higher self sits at a higher level of frequency, and it is aware of all
Right.
things, and it knows where you're supposed to be going based on what you decided that you wanted to do and experience in the 3D space within the lifetime. So I don't know, right? It's interesting because like you said, when you are in a zone, when you feel that this is the direction, that what you're doing is there, and that nothing's going to deter you from making something like that happen. It's the same thing when you're like when you're drawing or when you're, when you're in that meditative state, that you're almost, it's you, but it's not, is the best way to describe it, because it's so different than what you normally think, right? Because normally you've got a million thoughts rolling through your head all the time, and it's either the past or the future, and you're not really thinking about the present moment as much unless you're doing something that has you completely focused on the present. And I think that's the connection that you have to your higher self. And then there's this whole idea of like, okay, well, where does the higher self live? Where does it sit? I mean, some people are like, well, it's up there. Up where? Other people are like, no, it's in here. It's inside of you, because you are a fragment of your higher self, who is a fragment of the, God, creator, source.
Of
And
course.
so
Yeah.
you sit it sits here inside of you. And a lot of people are like, I was following a person who basically a really interesting analogy about this. And they said that, as you're discovering more about and you're remembering who you are, think about it like this. You are you're a car, and you're driving, right? And you have a steering wheel, but everything else around you is kind of, you don't have access to the other things that are in the car. You know that they're there, but you don't really have access to them. But as you keep moving forward and you connect better, then things start appearing, and you start taking advantage of like, oh, now I have this, now I have this, now I'm able to do these things, but they're all there, they all exist. It's more of
All
a matter of
exist.
like you tapping into that connection and raising your frequency so that you can actually see the things that exist, because they've always been there, you just haven't been able to
Right.
see them.
Yeah, your brain has decided to omit them. Proven fact. Yeah, I think we've talked about that in other
Mm-hmm.
podcasts that, you know, it where it has no interest or things. We have no interest in it. The only interest is that of survival and that of whatever idea or whatever fantasy you have of the day to keep your mind. It likes telling story. It focuses on these things, and just like example, if you want to buy a car, right? All of a sudden you're seeing all these Teslas around, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it catches your eye because your brain has now been programmed to be able to see that. Um, so I I I like the idea of the higher self, but I think for me, I like the words inner wisdom more. I think I like that more. It just sounds like
Sure.
because that's telling that it's not the external, right? It's not from the external, it's actually from within us. And we find this within us. We just have to, you know, remove all this programming and all these other things, right? That have clouded us. And I'm very fascinated in understanding if it's the subconscious mind that is somehow connected to that, or is it do you know what I'm saying? Like how do they all interplay within ourselves? Is the subconscious mind just the receptor, right? Like we're radio power, right? Is that the pineal gland? Is that what's taking in all the information and running in the background so it creates what it thinks we need? But it's not until the inner wisdom or the true self tells us, okay, no, like, okay, center, focus. You've been thinking this way. Let's change your thought process and to come online to which direction you need to go. So I think all that is fascinating. I do like inner wisdom because that's when we are truly connected and calm and in the flow, like most people say, right? Or you're able to see so much more
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
understand so much more. And it's like, and I know people feel it, and I know that. And it's just, it's, it's so hard to explain. Like it's not well, I guess you could say it's a silence in your mind. Then nothing's playing there. And it's just like, you just go,
Hmm.
you just do. and you just watch the stuff come, right? And then go this way, pivot that way, turn that way. And you just go. And it's so beautiful because when you finally like accomplish whatever it is, right? Then you look back and go, wow, how did I do that?
You're like, how did I make that shit happen? Like, what the
How did
hell?
that? Or even like when an artist or
Hmm.
someone writes a book or all this stuff, it's like, whoa, that was your inner wisdom that just came through and you centered together and just allowed for that information or whatever it is or creativity to come through, to be able to then bring you to the next phase or the next step or create something else. And it's once you start recognizing it, I think it's so amazing that that can happen. It is so amazing that that can happen. And I think that everything that tells you about the higher self makes it seem like it's not, you're not able to communicate or achieve
Hmm.
whatever because it's the higher self, because it's up here, it's far,
It's
all that
not.
kind of thinking, but it's not. And I mean, Carlos and I had this whole conversation about this, and it's like, wow, like you can communicate with it. Why not? Why not ask for
Hmm.
it to come online? Why can't ask, to support you in this and direct you in the answer in a way that is clear so you could understand?
Right.
If we're so clouded, if our judgment is so clouded, why not ask?
Well, when you think about it, you've had those moments where like you feel it in your gut or you feel it in your chest in that area where you're like, man, I don't know if I should be doing this. I don't know if I should. And it's that feeling that you get, and you're like, man, is that because it's not here? You're not thinking about it like this. It's coming from here. It's coming from that center where it's you feeling it in a different way. And so when you're feeling, joy and happiness, and you're feeling all of these things, true feeling, I think, is part of that. It's part of understanding that. And it's the mind that tries to make the connection and tries to label things and tries to recapture some of those things when
Right.
from external sources, when you know that it's here. And that's why there's a lot of teachings, all the teachings always say look within, go within. Well, yeah, because it all
Right.
exists inside of you. You just don't know how to, you just haven't expanded your awareness enough to see and take advantage of all of those things. And I think a lot of people don't. And there's some people that just innately do and they go with it. And so when you think about Native American cultures and you think about all of these older cultures where they were so in touch with nature, and they, all of it was based on how they felt about things. They led with their heart. They led with, that
Right.
inner wisdom, not as much with the logic of the mind. And I think
Right.
that what's happened now these days is we lead with that logic, that mind, instead of
Right.
listening to what's inside. And it's become very difficult for people to actually listen to it because it's not
Right.
been developed.
Right. Because we're always thinking that it's like either above here, right, above us, or it's within that we can't reach it
Yeah.
here or other. But we really, you're right. It is the full experience of the mind, body, soul, right? And these energetic feelings that we get. So for me, when I know that I am in that state, right? And I'm being led by my inner wisdom. Like you said, there's an expansion in your chest, like, oh, right? There's this, you're just, this is going to sound silly. You're gliding through the world, or your path or whatever it is. You're literally gliding through this, and you have this clarity. Those ideas or thoughts are not there in your mind. It's just like peaceful, and it's calm,
Right.
and you're relaxed, right? And there's, it's so amazing when it does happen. And I know I keep on using the word amazing because there's no other word I can use for it. because you can't, in my experience, like some of the stuff that I've gone through, I can't believe that I was like, okay, do that. Okay, do this. Okay, we'll go here. And that's just how it was. And it all showed itself and executed in a way that I didn't resist. And it happened. Because the moment that I started thinking, oh my gosh, what are you going to do? Da-da-da, boom, it kind of got a little cloudy and it's like, okay, let's breathe. Let's come back to center again and listen. Right. And then it was smooth sailing again. Um, and so, like I said, you are in awe of some of the things that you can achieve when you are connected to your inner self, and all these other parts of us aren't chattering,
Right. Right.
aren't chattering, that they're like taking a backseat because they know you're going to be safe, because your higher self will never direct you into something that is wrong.
So I was thinking about this, which is super interesting. When you're born, you come into this world, you're not tainted by anything yet, right? You haven't been indoctrinated, you haven't been programmed, you haven't there's nothing. So when you come in, you're your true self. Your true self is there. And as you start growing up and you start experiencing all of these things, traumas, stuff like that, and this is just an idea, your your spirit, your consciousness fragments into different pieces in order to be able to actually, survive, because that's what
Mm-hmm.
the human body does. And so you've got all of these different parts of you that have now been put off into these different places based on the conditioning and the programming that you have that are running this program that you've been forced to run. And so the whole goal of waking up is to bring all of these fragments back together, bring them all back, and understand who you really are, your true self really is. And that's why, I think people call it making connection with your higher self, but it's just basically bringing it all back in, because all we are we're like an organic mech when you think about it. We're
Mm-hmm.
this is our body, we're piloting it. When you think about it, like our consciousness is basically piloting all of this. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you think about it like that, of course, there's going to be different programs that are going to be running, and there's going to be some that you don't
Yep.
want to run that way anymore. And there's going to be stuff that's offline that you're going to want to bring back online. But you got to
Right.
remember how to do it. You're like, oh
How to
man,
do it.
I don't know how to actually bring. Okay, now I understand how to bring this back. And your humanness, your body fights it sometimes. The programming will fight it, because I think it's about the capacity of what you have in terms of awareness that'll allow you to see everything. The more capacity you actually have to be able to take it all in, the more you're going to be able to see, and the more you're going to be able to take advantage of the gifts that you have. But fear and all of these other things that we've traumas, stuff like that, will immediately bring it back. So your consciousness just comes back in because it's the defense mechanism instead of allowing it to expand. And so that's the challenge, is to, and that's why we have to get rid of all of the, confront the traumas, get rid of all that, so that we can actually expand our consciousness without fear having to bring it back in and keeping us in this state.
Right. That's nice to say that the traumas you get rid of, right? I think it's just the reactions and that
Mm-hmm.
fear and the negative self-talk from that. And I 100% agree with you. It's that programming that gets clutters and silences the higher self,
Mm-hmm.
or the inner wisdom, right? Because it wants us to survive and it wants us to be safe. So it's until you start working on those things that you're able to then have a more clear compassion and empathy for yourself, to then and know that you can do this and have that strength to have that clear connection with your inner wisdom. And when that happens, it's pretty amazing. For me, I can say that, you know 5 years ago I wouldn't have been able to get up and leave everything, leave home, leave job security, leave everything I knew and move to something different. But, and so quickly, right? without a thought or undermining a fear. And it all just happened. It all just happened because I was connected with that inner wisdom, and it directed me in the direction that I needed to go without resistance, right? With complete empathy for self, because it not only was directing me for that, it also was supporting me with the healing process that I
Hmm.
was going to. So these two things were happening at the same time. Um, and like I said, 5 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to have understood that, you know, because I wasn't in the mindset to be able to receive it. But I think in those 5 years, I was learning and growing and understanding and finding and seeking and all these other things that help support me to get to that moment, to make that decision in time, to be able to create another phase, right, in my life. And I think that's how um, we walk this path, we walk this earth that way.
I
You know,
also
it's
think
just
I also think that when you go through a lot of this stuff, you eventually realize that if you are a fragment of ultimately the of God, source, consciousness, then you're basically God. And I think a lot of people sell themselves short by saying, "No, I'm this less than, and my hope is to one day live with that." But it's like, dude, you are your part. And this is, I mean, even in like all of the scriptures, if you go back, God created man in his image. Of course, it's of course, because you're energetically, you guys, it's all the same. It's all the same.
all
And
the same.
so it's all the same. And so, I think people forget that. And that leads to, some of the challenges that they have with actually really fully experiencing their journey and finding their purpose, is because they always think that they're less than or unworthy or not. And that has to do, a lot of that has to do with the programming that you get, the religious indoctrination that teaches you that you're less than and that you're subservient to the higher power when you really are the higher power.
And I think it also is the collective of the living space, um, neighborhoods, all that stuff. And I know we talked about that before. The
Mm-hmm.
neighborhood we came from, we were not rich, we were not middle
Mm-hmm.
class. We were in, I guess, one step close to poverty in
Pretty much.
that way. And the neighborhood was just that. Although there was a lot of family because you needed family to survive. There was that mentality of we're just workers and content with just making ends meet to be able to have your carne asada, your cerveza, or whatever it was, right? On the weekend, or go to this um, party over here. And that was the content, right? Um, of just we're only meant to do this. That's what the neighborhood was. And it was set up that way. Like they don't want you out of that neighborhood. You were supposed to stay in that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let them stay
Absolutely.
within. You weren't supposed to leave. Um, and I think we grew up understanding that there was more to life than that. And we had different exposures to different types of people and different things. And those people came, you know, through decisions, hopefully, of our parents' higher self that helped us achieve college and know that there was something more than just staying as the uh, content in that neighborhood and staying in that neighborhood and not being able to grow and not being able to bring back to the neighborhood in that way, right? For growth. Um, so yeah, it is very interesting that we get influenced by a lot of things. And that is a lot of our environment and a lot about where we grow up and the collective of that. Because we're human, we're social creatures, we need others to survive. So we cling to that for survival, but it
Yep.
also creates things that inhibit growth. and inhibit our connection to who we truly are. So then in turn, we can all rise up, right? And like they say, um, instead of just staying where they wanted us to be.
Exactly. So that leads to another question though. So if our inner self, our inner wisdom, we're divine beings. Our inner self knows everything and is connected, fully connected, and helps guide us along on this journey. So what does that look like for then interstellar races? If you subscribe to the interstellar races, these beings, these that exist on different planets that are more technologically advanced and potentially at a higher frequency than we are, where do they sit? Are they, I'm sure if our higher self is connected, it knows all of these people
Mm-hmm.
or beings, let's refer to them as
Beings.
beings. Then it also knows all of the energetic beings that have been deities as well, because it's all part of the same thing. So I find that super interesting because the human mind tries to always stack things in a hierarchy. Well, you got these things and the interstellar beings and then the archangels and then blah 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 blah, blah, because it has to be closer to source. And the idea, if that's, I don't think that's the case. I don't see it that way. If you're truly in touch with your inner self, then you're on the same playing field that everybody else there is. You
Right.
just you can actually see them now and interact with them now, where before you couldn't. And I think
Yeah.
old people from back in the day made the mistake of like, oh my God, they're beings and I will worship them, not understanding that they're you are them.
Right. I think yeah, a lot of those depictions came from not understanding of what they were, right? They are beings, they obviously have essence.
Mm-hmm.
So if they have the essence, that means there's got to be also an inner wisdom within them, right? No matter who you are, I would think. Um, and I don't believe in the hierarchy either, because the hierarchy was just created as a conditioning for us.
Yep.
Right? A rule, the rule that you have this hierarchy, people above you, below you, whatever. Um, I think that it's all about our growth and learning, never for expansion.
Wild when you think about it like that, right? So, where people are like, I work with these deities and I worship them. And I'm just like, but cool to be able to say, look, thank you for your energy, because that's what you're basically doing. You're calling in energies from inside of you, actually, not from outside, from inside, to be able to that are representations of these things to be able to help you do something. So I think that's your higher self going, yo, hey, can we do some things here real quick? We need to kind of handle this. But that's your mind trying to, it can't wrap itself around what this actually is, so it has to create something to identify with, so it
Right.
it feels like it can do that. But I think ultimately it's all the same energy.
It is. It is. I think also where people make their mistake, I'm going to go into this manifestation portion of this thing in the higher self.
Mm-hmm.
To
Because it's
change
always
a
like
little
the
bit.
higher self can manifest. If you're
Right.
in touch with your
So
higher self, you can manifest.
I think a lot of the times what we do when we're manifesting that we can do that, 100% can. And we ask for these things and in a certain emotional way and, charged, right? Emotional charge to it. But I think what we don't realize when we don't use our higher self, right? When we don't use our inner wisdom, that we don't do it in a clear way. We don't do it in a clear way for it to be right for us
Hmm.
in this time, right? Be right for us. Um, I think that's what we forget. So someone can say they want to manifest, whatever amount of dollars um, that it is, have have earn more money or whatever it is that they could be wanting to manifest. And your mind and that energy goes out and then all of a sudden you lose your job or all these things happen, and then you like, oh my gosh, this doesn't work, I can't believe this. Da, 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 da. Well, you didn't clearly specify exactly how it should go, right? So did you really, you didn't consult your inner wisdom to be able to ask for that, what you need, the clear signs to be able to then, go through this rocky road to achieve whatever it was that you wanted. But no, you panic and you're stuck, and then you're like, oh my gosh, what did I do? And then you get scared, and all these other things that go in the mind, and then you block yourself from getting that said job, because you weren't clear enough to be able to um, achieve. Like, I'll give you one of my examples. I wanted uh, I wanted to manifest something, um, and it came back harsh. It came back harsh. It came back hard, and it was kicked my butt. And I was like, I'm very fortunate that I did have um, also a practice, right, to be able to center myself and to get through this. But, and I was able to get out of it and continue moving forward. But I could see that if you're just only focused on that manifestation game, that the outcome sometimes isn't great
Mm-hmm.
if you don't realize that you need this inner wisdom to be able to guide you through a lot of those things that you would like, or you may miss out on something that really was for you when you didn't see it. And the same thing goes with relationships. When people want to manifest these loves and all this stuff, um are you clear with your inner wisdom of what it is that is right for you, right, in this time, versus the check boxes?
Mm.
Has to be this, has to be that, has to be that, has to be that. So you're spewing all this stuff out there, and then that person comes to fruition, but it really what you needed in that space and time? And a lot of the times it's not, because you weren't aligned with your inner wisdom to then ask and speak for what it is that was right for you.
Yeah, super interesting. There's a there's a thought that you manifest and you can manifest things, and it's like expressing your desire and of what you want to see. And then there's the idea that you create, because you are ultimately a creator, just like
Sure.
the creator of everything, the all. So the approach is different because what you create comes from inside of you, and it's what is right for you. And you have to listen to that part of it. The manifestation stuff, sure, like you said, you can manifest. If you desire it, you can manifest it. The idea is that you can create things because they're there. They're already there for you. You just have to say, I'm creating this. This is the what I want. But you're listening to your inner self and making sure that you have everything, you're fully aware of everything that's going to happen, and everything that's going to happen when this becomes part of your actual reality. And I think a lot of times when people manifest, they're only seeing that short, small thing, but they're not seeing all of the things that come along with that. And that's where
That,
the surprises come in, where they're like, fuck, I didn't realize, holy, what? Oh no, I didn't expect that, or I didn't see that. Well, yeah, but you wanted this, and this is what you got. You made it.
and
Nobody
it
else
all
did.
hits you all at once, and boom, 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 boom,
You
boom, and
made
you're
it,
like,
but you didn't see the five other things that were going to come along with that. So, and I think that's the big difference between just
yeah,
manifesting and creating, because when you are creating, you fully understand it all. You understand the detail of all of it, and you're really willing that to happen in your reality.
yeah, it's that alignment and connection with the
Mm-hmm.
inner wisdom. I mean, it goes let's talk to the college students. It's like when you're writing your papers, like,
Mm-hmm.
and you, like, all of a sudden it like flows, and
Yeah, everything
because
comes
you're so
together.
aligned, and then everything comes together, and boom, it happens, and then your reader like, oh, that sounds really good. It's all those things. It's when we become aligned with our inner truth, I should say inner truth, wrong word, inner wisdom. Um,
Inner
then
self,
things,
inner wisdom. I like
right?
inner self because it's like it is you. It's still you. But
It
I think
is.
it's more of like what's the best way to put this? If you are a an organic mech, okay, like you have part of the bridge that sits here, right, where your logical thought goes in, but then you have your power core that and your power core is basically a think of it as like a sentient computer that knows everything about you that's ever happened across all of your lifetimes. And so
Mhm.
it would be stupid of you not to tap into not to tap into that to be like, yo,
Wisdom.
let me know some
Yeah.
things, please, because I'm about to do this thing and I really, really want to know if like am I doing the right thing based on all the things that you know, am I doing the right thing? Just need to check real quick, right? Because sometimes it'll tell you, it'll be like, this is not going to be the right for you, but you go ahead and do it anyway.
Right. And you ask for that clarity. You ask for the response so you can understand it, right?
Yeah, yeah,
In a kind, gracious, and perfect way so that you are able to see it.
right.
Because a lot of times we can't. So when you start, ask and ask in that way to give you a response,
Right.
right? Give
Right.
you a clue, give you a lead, whatever way you want to call it, so then you can see it and watch it in front of you, so it's not as harsh on you, or not as fast and hits you in the face, and then you're like, oh, I'm not going to do this anymore,
Well, I think
or
that's the thing that people don't they're not tuned in to listen to when that happens when they're going down a path and this part says, "Yo, dude, don't want to go down that path. Don't want to go down that path." And you don't listen. Eventually there's going to be an override that happens and you get yanked. And when you get yanked, it's not it's not because again, your inner self, it's not doesn't care. There's no
right,
there's not any of that. It just is. And so
right,
you're like, you're going off the path. Okay, we're going to correct that.
right. Yep. And it'll be a setback, maybe a little setback, maybe a longer setback, and
Yeah.
then
You'll
you
experience some
regroup.
pain, you'll experience
Right.
whatever, but then you'll regroup and then you'll be like, oh man, maybe that wasn't the right decision. Maybe that wasn't the right decision after all. Maybe I'd made a mistake. Well, yeah, if you would have actually listened, it would have not been so would not been so painful. It's almost like you're a
Right.
kid and you're learning.
Yeah, exactly. But this is the real game of life. And it's just like, what the heck? What happened now? Oh my goodness gracious. Okay, I said it that way. Ooh, boy. Yeah, just
So there was another piece that was really interesting, and it was called I read about it. It's called the Oversoul, and there's a couple of ideas of what the Oversoul is. So you have your higher self, and your higher self is basically all knowing and it knows all the things, but the Oversoul is basically the connection between all of the higher selves across the grid. So everybody is aware of everything that is happening, and so that's where people are able. That's why people are actually able to get um, see other people's possibilities and timelines and things like that. Or you get an intuition about somebody, or you get some message for somebody because everybody's ultimately connected.
right in the grid. So
And
there's an overseer of the grid.
the oversoul is basically the conglomeration of all of the higher selves.
Okay, so all your okay, because they're in the grid.
Yeah, because everybody's in the grid. So that it's basically, again, it's a labeling. It's
There's a
basically
labeling.
it's basically the oversoul is all of them, right? The collective consciousness of all of the higher selves that exist.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Interesting.
And so you wonder, it's like, okay, so if there's higher selves and they all exist, is there higher selves here and is there higher selves on other planets and are they all connected? Like, are there multiples? Like, so it
I
just gets into
wonder,
the
I
you get into
wonder,
this like
I wonder if they're the ones they have quick access to the library in the field, you know.
I don't
Do they
know.
go
And so
there
that's
to
again,
bring it back?
that's the super interesting part when you think about like Akashic records, right? Your higher self or your inner self is knows everything, knows all things. That's the idea, that it's connected. It knows, it's aware of everything and everybody with that's because it's a fragment of source and it knows all of these things. So the whole Akashic records thing is basically your consciousness trying to access or talk to your higher self, and it doesn't really fully, again, we have to, because we're finite in what our bodies can do and our minds, you know, we have to picture something. And I think the picturing and using the imagination is the bridge that connects us, right, to all of this stuff. And so I think the Akashic records thing is basically our holographic image of what we think that looks like or what we think that should look like. And I think it's
Interesting.
because people have talked about it before. I think that
Mm.
subliminally just gets in people's heads and they're like, oh, I got to go to this place, I got to go to this library. But I don't think it has to be that. I think it could be something completely different for somebody who wants to visualize it a different way. It's
So,
just being able to, like I
so
said
we could
before.
understand it. So we could understand it
Yeah.
as being because we're all
Yeah.
conditioned to a library that holds books and knowledge and wisdom. And yeah, yeah,
Yeah, but you could be like I told you, you could have a sentient in your mind. You could be like, oh, this is the main computer on my Mac, my human Mac, that has all of this knowledge. I need to access it. I'm going to sit with it, talk to it, and it'll tell me what I need to know. It's basically like going to the Akashic records and seeing, if you want to know that, you can.
right.
And sometimes it's probably like, yo, you don't need to know that. There's no reason. Why would you want to know that?
I wonder if it has rules of what it can and cannot say. I wonder. What do you think?
I think that it depends. Ooh, that's an interesting one. I think it depends on your level of awareness and frequency of what you can actually ask it
So then you don't freak out
yourself. What you ask
what it
yourself,
tells.
basically.
So we don't freak out about
Right.
what
It's
we're
all
seeing.
there. I think it's all there, but I
Mm.
think you have to be at that level of frequency to be able to see it and be aware of all of that and actually understand what's coming through. Because I think it's a protection mechanism for you so that you
That's
don't
kind of, yeah, that you
go
don't
crazy.
go, your vessel can't handle it. That makes sense. I could see that. Yeah, that you don't open up something and then you just no longer can come back because the world is not what you want it to be. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't know how to handle some of that stuff that could come through, because if you think about different parts of where you were on your journey and you're like, what would I do if if I got hit all of a sudden with this idea that I went to the Akashic records and I got to see my multiple lifetimes? If you're not ready for that, you're gonna it's gonna throw you for a loop. You're gonna think, you're like, am I crazy? Like, what am I saying? I don't know. I gotta go get on pills. I don't know. Right. And I think that that happens to a lot of people because they're open somehow. They're open
Yeah.
and they don't
Yeah.
quite know how to deal with that yet.
Yeah, how to process it. It's the same thing with psychedelics. Like when people go on those trips that in the trip itself, when they return with a little more clarity and but they go back into the world and the world isn't what they would like it to be. They want to kind of continue to stay in that trip, right? Space, the aura of the trip, the glow of the trip. Um, but that's just not how it is in the world. So I'm thinking that that's like a that's like a similarity, right? Um, that we may not be able to handle living in this dense world because that's how this world functions. So our higher self or inner wisdom has to function in this vessel to be able to sustain itself in this dense world.
Right. Well, or think about it like I heard somebody talk about it like this, where your inner self energetically, your inner self is, it's a core being, and it sits at a high level of frequency and energy, and it will not, or it cannot manifest in physical reality because it's dense, it's super dense, but it can send a fragment of itself into that physical reality to manifest, to have these experiences, to be able
Yeah.
to
Because
do
it could
that.
fit in our vessel.
Yeah, so because it can
It
fit
could
in there,
function in our
right?
vessel.
It can function
Yeah.
like that. And so this is our consciousness, but the subconscious itself, there's, and I don't know, this is, could get into like the quantum physics realm, the multiple dimensions, is it off, does this sit in a different dimension that's tied in? Like, where does it sit? I think it just sits inside of our energetic being, the core of our energetic being. Um, the universe sits there, I think. And that's where we get all of that information from. I think that's what it is. But who knows? Again, we're all just speculating on it. Nobody knows the the truth of it all.
Yeah. The truth of it all. So it's all really cool, I think.
It's so
But
fascinating, right? Like, you're
I
just
think
like, oh my God, what
we
is, how do you
I
think
think
about?
but I think we could use much of these principles to be able to support us in creating, right? I
Right.
think that's also our purpose of this podcast is to be able to help the listener or give a little bit of insight to the listener on how we could create things for self by
Yes.
actually talking to our inner wisdom
Right.
and asking our inner wisdom versus asking what's the external, right? Or
Correct.
asking like, I mean, asking for intercession from a deity is amazing, and that is an energy that's brought, but it's our inner wisdom that'll be able to know what to do with that energy
Correct.
that that intercession may bring, right? So it's being able to ask the inner self, why not?
Yeah, let's do
It's
it.
untapped. A lot of people don't tap into that. And it's so funny because I was telling Carlos this that why not? Why don't people do that more often? Why aren't we connecting to our inner wisdom, our higher self? Why aren't we asking it? And it's a lot of the times because our programming or our parts or these attachments or whatever it is that are part of us cloud it because the inner self is always clear and centered, but these other parts are always like we'll call them more flamboyant, right?
Yes,
More
yes.
louder
Hmm.
and things like that because they are like shouting for safety or shouting you can't do it because of this and so once those all settle and are able to realize, hey, I got this. I have the direct connection now to my inner wisdom that can guide me and I will be okay. I will be okay.
Yeah.
Right? There's no
And I
fear
think
that's
that's
going to be
the big part of it all, is we've been conditioned to see everything externally. Reach for the thing externally. God is sitting there in heaven somewhere, and you ask for intercession, and the deities and the archangels and everything else that exists is out there, and they can help you. But it's like, it's all here, dude. Like, nobody teaches that. You don't hear that when you're a child, right? That's not something that you immediately hear. And it would be really nice to be able to say, hey, you got to talk to yourself, man. Like, you know. And I honestly think that your imagination is the key to all of it, because you have to be able to picture it
Mm-hmm.
when you're talking to your inner self. You picture it, you see it in your mind, of you talking to whatever it is that you decide that you want it to look like, because your inner self doesn't give a shit. It's more of like, what do you feel comfortable in imagining that your inner self looks like, and start the communication process.
Right. And to be clear that your inner self is always compassionate.
Always.
It doesn't talk shit about you. It
Mm-mm.
it does not belittle you. It does not do any of that. it does not create fantasy. It is very direct.
Yep. It'll tell you, what are you doing?
Yes. Yeah, and
Why are you doing that?
it's not an unhealthy voice. Let's just say
It
that.
is
It's
not.
not,
It is not. It is not an
uh,
unhealthy voice. I think a lot of times your mind itself is, and your programming is that unhealthy voice. It is the stuff that keeps coming through and saying, hey, you're not good enough, or you're blah, 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 or you're unworthy, or whatever. That's all here, right?
programming.
This
Programming.
is not that.
Right.
It's not that.
And the beauty of understanding that programming, you learn that it's not the right voice to listen to.
Correct. And fear is a
Inner
bitch. Fear is a son of a bitch,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's probably one of the biggest ones to overcome is fear, because again, it is part of our natural being a human in this
Mm-hmm.
body. There is some
Mm-hmm.
genetic predisposition, and it's fear is one of them. And if
It's
you are grown
primal.
up, then if you grow up in a household that's all about it's fear based, and in a religion that's all
Mm-hmm.
fear based, that's one of the
Mm-hmm.
biggest things that you have to overcome, is that fear of everything, knowing that it's going to be okay. You listen to yourself, you listen to your inner self, it will not steer you wrong. Now you may not fully understand the direction that you're headed sometimes, or what the ultimate outcome of that looks like, but a year from now, you'll look back and you go, oh man, yeah, I get it now. I understand why I had to
Mm-hmm.
go through and do all of these things. I get
Yep.
it.
So what people like doing, I'll just throw this one out here, is creating chaos. Because what does chaos create? Chaos creates fear, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
that's within us, from
Mm-hmm.
within us, because we're animals. And when you create chaos, you create fear. When you create fear, you create disorder. You create like no direction.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just put it that way. Let's use that word. You create no direction. And then you have this panic. So, and we see that, and we're seeing that right now,
Yep.
right? So let's harness that fear. Let's ease that fear, right? Let's talk to our inner wisdom, which many people have done and have created these things to be able to help other people, right? Listen to your inner wisdom because it's going to be strong at this point. Allow yourself to listen, like shut that fear out, shut that voice out, those naysayers, all that, shut that out, right? And listen to your inner wisdom because it will not guide you wrong.
No,
It'll
exactly.
get you through this. It'll get you through this.
Yeah, it'll get you through a lot of things, a lot of challenging things, and that happen on the journey for sure. But I think that's
Definitely.
that's a really good message. Is exactly that. Is your inner wisdom, your inner self, will guide you and will not steer you wrong. And ultimately, you will be better off for listening. And it's really hard. It's really hard sometimes, because there is a disconnect between what the mind wants to do and the logic and what it says and what the inner self wants to do. And so I think part of using that learning is to be able to really understand that and listen to that more. Crazy.
Recognize that the chaos creation is part of the game of control.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It
control the
is. It is. I think that there's a time and a place for chaos. I think that chaos, as we said before, leads to innovation and change
change.
at the highest level, and it forces change. And
Right.
so,
When the people are able to have that clarity
yes, when
to
they're able to have that clarity, but it can be misused, and we're seeing it misused.
yeah.
So that's when you really need to lean in, because you're going to get
And
hit by all kinds of things energetically that are coming through in the form
mhm.
of what you consume on social media, in the form of what you hear on the news, all of this stuff. It's meant to do that to you. So use discernment and really
Yep.
lean into yourself.
your inner wisdom, and you will have clarity to see those who will help you.
Because you're not alone.
No, they're not alone. And then even then, you may be the one that will be helping others
Exactly. Exactly. And that's
and
going to be
take
the
that,
mission.
yep, and take that experience and grow to grow and grow and grow. Yep.
What a
I
great
think that is a
conversation.
good ending to our conversation.
Yes, yes. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you guys it helped. For me, it definitely does to talk through all of this stuff, but it's also, one of those things that will lead to additional questions. And I think that's part of the journey is continue to ask questions. Don't take everything for face value. Go with what resonates with you and keep learning and keep growing.
Yes, keep learning, keep growing, read books. There's plenty of wisdom, channeled wisdom within a lot of these books, and grab what feels right for you.
Mhm. And go into the whys, go into
Yes,
yourself.
the inner self, the inner self.
All right, y'all. Thank you so much for your time. We'll see you
All right,
again.
yes,
Bye.
peace.
All right.